This is the Clutch Picks Betting Podcast presented by ClutchPoints, powered by DraftKings. Like, follow, and subscribe. Rate us, review us, all that other fun stuff. Apple, Spotify, and YouTube. My name is Sheldon Alexander, and I'm joined by my guy, Matt Russell, sports betting professional and creator of The Window, available on Substack, wherever you get your podcast. Mr. Matt Russell, we are almost into like the hot season of the NFL, the hot part of the season of the NFL. I'm talking, we got games every day of the week coming up soon. It's almost Thanksgiving, and we got Christmas. There's Black Friday games in there, all kinds of stuff going on. Holiday season, is that sleigh bells ringing in the background? Like, lots going on. How are you doing, my friend?
A little like pre-overwhelmed. Can you be pre-whelmed? Okay. Right? Like Thanksgiving, like I love it. And, a lot of it is like, let's get as much done as we can before Thursday at noon. Ball's kicking off in Detroit. Yep. And we're not even there at that week yet, but like, I can feel it coming. Right. Yeah. It's coming down the tracks. And so between that and the cluster that is college football bowl season and playoffs and conference championships, we have all these games that we don't even know technically exist yet. Mm-hmm. That's the thing that I don't even know, just going down a rabbit hole for everybody out there. But like, I don't know why, but like there is something that kind of disconcerts me about not knowing what the matchups are going to be, even though like I'm not going to get to like week 14 of the NFL before we get to really week 14 of the NFL. So like, why do I care, that like the, Futures Bowl is coming down the tracks and I don't know who's matching up. So I don't know. Point is like, we're about to get into like the really, really crazy, like you mentioned, I don't think we've got the NFL where it's like every day of the week, just because Christmas is landing on, I believe, a Thursday. Somebody's gonna have to check that for me. So we don't have like there's a game on Tuesday this year and on Wednesday and on this day. Remember last year where it was like every day of the week there's an NFL game at some point during the season.
Christmas
at least
is
we don't
Thursday.
have that. So, might be able to find a day off here or there, but that's after a pretty significant stretch here where, listen, where the whole point is to have fun, right? The whole point is just good times, but doesn't mean that it's not a little overwhelming from time to time.
Good times will be had by all on this pod as well, especially for the new folks and for those who are new. Here's what we do. Matt talks a lot about market ratings, which I think is the most interesting thing about this whole football betting stuff. So make sure you pay attention to that stuff. Make sure you read Matt's stuff, because that will help you with the conversations that we're having here. But what we do on this pod, I'm going to give you a pick, and then Matt comes in with the information and education on where the line was, where it is, where it could be heading into kickoff. I then come out on the other end with a much more informed pick. I try to play the role of the viewer. Sometimes Matt convinced me to change my pick, and other times I foolishly don't listen. But that's the show. That's the joke. That's the bit. That's what we do here. The goal for me is to win more than I lose, which, again, the joke, the bit, last week, 7-7-1.
Like, that's too good.
What is happening?
I don't know if people realize this. I do not know every week. I do not know what your record is. Well, again, like I don't bet every single game. We obviously bet a ton of them over at the window, and we always talk about like how many did we get you to switch? Like at the end of last week's podcast, like we went back and looked. I'm like, I don't even know how well those necessarily went relative to your record. So like, and there's been weeks where like you do amazing, and I have no idea that that's coming, and then there are weeks where you don't do so amazing, and I'm like, what happened? I felt like we did pretty well because I did pretty well, but it's with less games. Anyway, point is like it's always honestly like my favorite thing, just like waiting to find out like how did he do? And when you hit a 7-7-1, which like including a push is just like chef's kiss, like this, that's just the best. So I hope people get as much of a kick out of it as I do.
83-80-1 on the week, or last week, that is, as we head into week 12. And week 12, you got the Broncos, Dolphins, Chargers, and Commanders all on a bye week, which means week 12 in the NFL season starts on Thursday Night Football with the Buffalo Bills as 6-point favorites in Houston taking on the Texans. And Josh Allen did the whole Josh Allen thing last week where, there's a wild turnover, but then he goes Josh Allen mode where it's just 3 rushing touchdowns, 3 passing touchdowns. Just get on my back. I got this. No problem. Flip side, you got Davis Mills, who, continues to do a serviceable job in place of CJ Stroud. And, Davis Mills, second half, it's like he remembered, hey, we got this guy, Nico Collins. I might want to throw him the ball sometimes. He's pretty good.
That's
that might be a thing to do here. But the thing about the Texans is all about their defense. Their defense continues to do the job. This line, I'm guessing, is a Davis Mills line because I'm assuming that there's no chance CJ Stroud's going to be back for a Thursday night after the concussion protocol. So the 6 with that defense and a serviceable backup QB, you know what? I kind of like the Texans here at home. I'm getting 6 points. I'm going to take the 6 points. Let's roll.
Yeah. So that Bills game, let's start there. We need something like triple double in the NBA where if Josh Allen had 3 passing touchdowns, 3 rushing touchdowns, and 3 interceptions.
Ooh.
Right? The triple, I guess, is as simple as we could make it, but or triple trouble or something. I don't know. We're gonna workshop that one. Not that I don't know that anybody's ever gonna do it, to be honest with you. Or maybe it's 3 turnovers. Maybe we just gotta lower the bar a bit for it. It's Josh Allen being Superman again, right? And again, I don't know. With 1 o'clock games, I'm always kind of wondering, 4 o'clock, there's 2, 3, 4 games, and there's always kind of America's game of the week, or the number one game that kind of everybody's keeping their eye on. Last week we had 2 of them, but at 1 o'clock, I'm never really sure who's watching what, because you can gravitate to what the closest game is or whatever. I don't know. I'm watching that Bills game super, super close, and again, and I was on Buffalo and wasn't pumped about it for the entire game, watching that team play. And I just look at it and I go, especially at this point in the season, right, where you have to sort of move away from your priors. And I talked about that a fair amount on my podcast this week because it's that time of year where, your priors are quite literally what we thought prior to the season, what we kind of came into the season, having all this time to think about these teams. And when it comes to teams like the Ravens and the Bills and some of these, the royalty, the modern royalty of the last few years, the expectation is they're just going to be good because they have this player, that player, or this unit or that unit. And Josh Allen basically qualifies as both, right? He is quite literally a unit unto of himself, and he is still very much the most valuable player in the NFL. And that was no more the case on Sunday because I'm watching this guy and I'm watching the rest of the team, and I'm just there is nothing around this guy. James Cook is obviously great, and when they get him running the ball against some of these inferior teams, that takes some of the pressure off of Josh. But the more I look at it, the more you just are going to sit back and go, whoever you want to blame, whether it's Sean McDermott, the general management of the Bills, or whatever, they're going to waste Josh Allen's career here. Because the rest of this team's god-awful. And I'm watching some of the defenders kind of chasing after the Sean Tuckers of the world and the Rashawn Whites of the world in open space. And I'm just that doesn't seem like an NFL level speed athlete at this point. And so I'm, pointing some fingers at some of their linebacking crew and, the safety duo and just the fact that honestly, the cornerbacks are playing worse than they ever have before. And I'm not super sure they hit on Maxwell Hairston, I believe his first round pick out of Kentucky at corner. And, you can blame it on, a couple of injuries here or there, but there are other teams getting around that. And the Bills just aren't. And they go and they win and they cover that game. And so the point of all of this is to say, from an eye test perspective, watching that game, I'm just going you know what, unfortunately, and I don't love it, I think Bills fans can go ahead and make other plans in late January and early February. And so when I sort of am watching, thinking that to myself, despite all of Allen's heroics, I think that they shouldn't be getting an upgrade for winning and covering. And as we always talk about, if you win and cover, you're going to get an upgrade in the betting market by and large. And honestly, when you don't, there's usually kind of either a red flag in there somewhere, and maybe an injury. We had that situation with the Bears last week, but they got an upgrade for this. And to me, it just looks like you're somebody watching the scoreboard and going, yep, covered and one outright, obviously, and covered. And they need to get an upgrade. And that's the only way I can get anywhere near Bills -6 on the road here against the Texans. Now, the other thing here, of course, is the Texans are without CJ Stroud, and they, speaking of scoreboard, they only win by 3 at Tennessee last week, right? And so you get that sort of scarlet letter of not being able to cover a game against the Tennessee Titans. But like the Tennessee Titans, as we've talked about before, they're going to play you well for 30 minutes.
We were
They
on
got 30
Tennessee.
to 40 minutes. We were on Tennessee. And part of that is, as you and I talk about as well, right? If you have the expectation that a team isn't going to play great and then they don't play great, that's to me more about them playing at the bottom side of their range than it is their average needing to change in the market rating, right? So in the case of the Texans, to be super specific about it, right? If without, any injury issue with the quarterback and CJ Stroud, right, their range is generally 45 to 60. So when they're playing really well, they look like a team who's above average, maybe could contend for the division. Listen, they were the favorite to win the division before the season started, right? Like that is around like a high 50s type of credit that they were getting. Now, we're probably not going to see them ever kind of really get to that because they've been disappointing this season. And so you and I, again, have talked about the idea Stroud comes out, Davis Mills comes in. Is that really as much of a downgrade as we think it is? And so the Texans rating to get to this number is down at like 41 out of 100. And honestly, the defense is too good for that to be the rating, in my opinion. And so when you take the Bills from home in a game where they should have been locked in both sides of the ball, having lost to the Dolphins the week before in frankly embarrassing fashion, and to put forth that defensive, I don't want to say effort, I just think it's an incapability. Like, I don't think it's them, like, sort of not showing up. It's just, like, they don't have the dudes to do it. And we've talked all season about, like, how the run defense is terrible. And I didn't think, part of the handicap for taking the Bills is, like, I don't think the Buccaneers can take advantage of this run defense. I haven't seen it all season with the Rashad Whites and Sean Tuckers of the world. And then all those guys do is just run all over the Buffalo Bills. So if you don't think if you think those guys can do it, or you can watch those guys do it, I'm here to tell you that like Woody Marks and Nick Chubb can do it for the Texans. And so, like essentially anybody can run. And so when anybody can run, all of a sudden the quarterback gets a lot better. So things are going to get easier for Davis Mills, and he's going to look a little bit more like CJ Stroud. And so the performance of the Texans this week against that Bills defense, I think, is not going to be a 41. And again, we sort of predicted that they might kind of be in that 41 range because we thought that number was too high last week with or without CJ Stroud. And so again, if I think that the Texans, having just, by the way, won 2 straight games, they're still winning football games. And we get caught up. I certainly do from a betting perspective. Are you covering games? Like that stuff matters. I'd cite the Broncos, right, as a team that everybody got worked up because they weren't blowing out bad teams. And yet when it comes to actually winning a football game, who are the teams that are doing it? Denver and Philadelphia, right? Like 2 teams that like you could easily see getting a number 1 seed in the conference. And so, the Texans aren't at that level, but like they're winning games. And honestly, I don't think the Bills are particularly that good. There shouldn't be a team that's rated in the low 70s right now. They are rated right alongside the Seahawks and the Eagles. I'm sorry, man. Like, I love Josh Allen. Like, I respect Josh Allen more than anybody here. But, like, I don't have that for a team-wide situation unless Allen, on a week-to-week basis, is going to play that well. And against this defense on the road 4 days after playing that well, it's so hard. It's so hard for any player. It's a huge ask to. I mean, we didn't even, the Kansas City to Miami thing, right? Like, where he plays really well against Kansas City, and it's like you just can't do it the second straight week. And like again, like you said, it's just asking too much.
Yeah.
And so if you're telling me from an average play perspective on Thursday, we're supposed to get a 70 out of the Bills, I don't think so. And then we're only supposed to get a 40 to 41 out of the Texans, which is how we get to +6 here. I think they can do better than that. Again, even if it's just the defense and the running game and things getting it a little easier from Davis Mills. And by the way, should be able to throw with Nico Collins, to Nico Collins as well. So, man, I can't believe this number is as high as it is. And frankly, I think the Texans have a real shot to win this game outright and really jam things up. In the AFC wild card. Really get a little weird here with the 2 teams in the AFC South and then the 2 like royalties of the Chiefs and the Bills. Like, it could get really weird.
Yeah, no, definitely could get really weird. And I am definitely with you there on the Houston Texans. But I was going to segue into talking about the Chiefs, but conveniently enough, That is our next game.
Mm.
The Colts are in Kansas City to take on the Chiefs. The Chiefs are 3.5-point favorites. And what I was about to say is we could be in a scenario, like you just said, where the Chiefs and Bills are fighting for wild card spots in the AFC, which is a little crazy. But let's stick with the Chiefs here. Last week, you were right. We were talking about Mahomes. I was like, I'm trusting in Mahomes, I'm trusting in the institution that is Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes coming off a bye, and Mahomes just didn't play well. The Broncos just looked flat out better. Their defense made Mahomes look fairly average. I mean, the Chiefs lost a fourth quarter lead. Just to put this in perspective, okay, last year, what was the number? They were 11-0 last year in one-score games. This season, they're 0-5. That's like... Yeah. We thought at the start of the year, I'm going to give you credit here on our season preview.
I'll take it.
Season preview, when we talked about who could win the division and we were talking about the other teams, one of the big things you talked about was the fact that the Chiefs' record in one-score games, they got a little, you don't want to say lucky, but they were, 11-0 is pretty crazy. And we thought that could not continue this year as well. And hey, if they met in the middle somewhere, cool. But to be 0-5 this year is pretty insane. So I'm going to simply say this.
That's
Denver
right.
was 3.5-point dogs at home to the Chiefs. And now the Chiefs are 3.5-point favorites again, but this time at home versus the Colts. What if I think the Colts are just better than Denver and the Colts are coming off a bye? I know that the Chiefs are going from road to home. I get that. But the Colts, I like the fact that I'm getting over 3 here. I'm getting more than a field goal here. I kind of like that with the Colts. Yeah. I'm on the Colts.
Yeah. That's interesting. I think, again, fundamentally,
threw a lot at you there.
Yeah, you did. You did when you started going Colts to Broncos comparisons. I was like, ooh. I think in general, right, a lot of this stuff kind of comes back to, again, you hate to harp on it, right? The era that we live in, fantasy football points, offense, all the rules changing to benefit offense, right? Like we have to have less tackling and more offense. And so that sort of permeates to the fact that like when we see teams that are, I don't want to say only, but like getting by on defense, like Denver, like Philadelphia, we're kind of like not grossed out by it, but we're just like, well, yeah, but like when it comes down to like the playoffs, it's like, oh, you mean the place where they play like all of the super cold weather games, and you know what I mean? Like, I think that's probably where you want to have the defense. But again, like, we can kind of knock Mahomes a little bit for that game. But again, I think it's people just kind of disrespecting the general concept of like really good defenses. And sometimes it's kind of super obvious in a way where like the Eagles against the Lions last week was just a super obvious like defensive performance. And then sometimes it's just a lot more subtle, right? Where it's like you're forcing punts and you're getting teams out of field goal range and so on and so forth.
Well, they were baiting Mahomes in the interceptions. Like you don't really see that.
No, for sure. And that's what and again, that's schematics, right? And so I don't know that the Colts have that in their holster. And so where I'm kind of going with this from a market perspective is, number one, going back to that Chiefs and Broncos game, I looked at that pretty simply as like the Broncos are the team, as much as I think we're overrating the Chiefs because we acknowledged, right, like that they had been rated head and shoulders above every other team. And they were still like the Super Bowl favorites, and they're sitting there at 5-4. And eventually, your record does have to matter a little bit. And so, as much as you and I aren't like, you couldn't tell me like, hey, name this team's record right now. Like, I wouldn't be able to do it because I don't really care what their record is. I only care about how I value the team and how the market values the team. And so, like, yes, the Chiefs are a little bit overrated in that situation, and it's simple as like, frankly, Shell, like you being like, I'm just going to trust Mahomes, -3.5. Like, I don't even really care that it's over a field goal, right? And like, that's the qualitative assessment of what our quantitative numbers say. And that like, yeah, the Chiefs are rated super, super high. That rating has come down, right? Having lost that game. So people are a little, and even just again, the qualitative element of you being like, oh, I'm not now going to trust Mahomes. I'm now fine. You know what I mean? Like
At
getting the
home.
hook at home against a team like, listen, it's debatable whether which team's better, but like they played a pretty damn close game early on this season in Indianapolis, where for 2.3 seconds, I think we all thought that the Broncos had won that game until they get called for a penalty again, on the field goal that was super sketchy. So,
Very
I
sketchy.
don't know that I don't know that I'm like Colts are better than them per se. Um, Again, we drop that rating down. We also compare again. My whole sort of line of answering here was that the Broncos were super underrated because of the same thing with the Eagles. Only the Eagles actually have a good rating and the Broncos don't. The Colts have a good rating, right? This is
Mhm.
not an underrated Colts team. Everybody is fully on board with the Colts because they're up in that group, that echelon that features, Rams, Seahawks, Ravens, the Bills, et cetera, et cetera. So, yeah, I mean, they're coming off a bye, but like, what does that sort of get them other than a little bit of health? And that's the thing that I'm going to be watching for this week. Because when they got through that game 2 weeks ago, they were without the basic middle of their defense. And I think you and I talked about it, though it might not have come out until after leading up to that game. But DeForest Buckner was out for that game.
Mhm.
And he, along with Grover Stewart, are the sort of centerpiece of that defense, right? The run stopping centerpiece of that defense. And Buckner's out again. He got put on IR. And so when one of those two guys doesn't play, it opens things up for the opponent's run game. And so against Atlanta takes that lead and holds that lead because Tyler Algier is able to run, and of course Bijan is able to run. And then Grover Stewart comes out of that game, and now they're without both guys. So it
Yeah.
looks like Stewart's going to play in this game, but like it would be, you never really know about like how long that might necessarily last and how much of a lingering issue that is. So that's the sort of benefit to the bye, because from a schematic standpoint, from an offensive standpoint, yes, obviously, our boy, right? Like Jonathan Taylor, like, will not say anything negative about Jonathan Taylor. But the Jonathan Taylor, Shane Steichen, you can throw in Daniel Jones, like triumvirate, which is essentially what the Eagles did from last year and the year before, where it's Shane Steichen, former Eagles offensive coordinator, and then Saquon Barkley, Eagles, running back from last season. Like it's all like it's like Shane Steichen finally got a healthy Jonathan Stewart, and the same way that the Eagles finally got a top level running back in Saquon, and were able to take the offense that they've been running under Shane Steichen years before, and we're able to be awesome with it. And that's what we're seeing. We're seeing Jonathan Taylor doing a Saquon Barkley impression from last season, and the Chiefs have prepared for that a million times because they keep playing the Eagles in the regular season and they keep playing the Eagles in the Super Bowl. And so the reason the Chiefs lost the Super Bowl last year wasn't because Saquon Barkley ran all over them, right? They were able to shut down Saquon Barkley. Jalen
Yeah.
Hurts hit a couple deep passes, but moreover, the Eagles defense absolutely just crushed Mahomes. I don't see that necessarily coming from the Colts defense, where
Okay.
it's Mahomes is consistently under pressure. He's getting baited into some throws, this, that, or whatever. I still have a high opinion of the Chiefs. Again, from a rating perspective, 78, 79, like that was a bit much. But now that we're kind of back into the low 70s, where they're tied with another team, by the way.
Mhm.
Like that's how quick this can be. Where last week we're sitting there going like they're head and shoulders above everybody else from a market perspective. And so it's easy to be like, well, I don't think any team should be head and shoulders of any other team. And it took 1 week, one game for them to come down to being tied right now from a market opinion perspective. Like that's crazy how like the market shifts around again based off of one game on the road against a really good defense. So as weird as this to say, and it's not a buy low because we have seen the Chiefs rating lower than this, right? Like early on in the season, they're missing all these guys. They've lost a couple of games, right? Week 3, it was super low. A couple of others, couple last year that were like that as well. So it's not a super buy low. It's more just like we're not buying low on the opponent with the Colts here.
Yeah.
right? Which we were last week against the Broncos. So I think the Chiefs offense gets a lot better this week against, again, you can tell me Sauce Gardner. I made the same argument last week about like the Patrick Surtain. You think we're just going to throw at Sauce Gardner all game? Like, you think Andy Reid is up for just hucking it at Sauce Gardner all game? Like, no, he's going to put in the plays that just run Sauce Gardner off. And then they're going to throw it to the people who are not being covered by Sauce Gardner. And that's a pretty significant downgrade the rest of the way. And so when you don't have the same pressure that the Broncos are able to get with that depth of defensive line. What does that sound like? I don't know, the Philadelphia Eagles from last year, where you're just rotating dudes who are coming in and just waylaying some of these offensive linemen. I think that this is, I mean, you can do the whole thing, like backs against the wall, focus, whatever, with regards to the Chiefs, but like, it is true. And I think they're a more well-rounded group than, say, like the Bills, who we had that same expectation of last week, where it's like, this is the game like that you don't have to win it, because like in theory, the Chiefs can beat anybody and could win the rest of their games.
Yeah.
Like coming off that game last week, right? Like I envision the Chiefs putting forth their sort of best game. I liken it to maybe that game against Detroit, maybe a month ago, where it was like a short line
Same
here,
thing.
right? And it's like, well, Detroit, same kind of deal, where it's like Detroit, like they can come in and like do some stuff, and we're getting some points with the Lions. And it's like, yeah, all that stuff is true. But like once we sort of get into like, do the whole thing of like Spagnuolo against Daniel Jones, and maybe there's some turnovers there, I think the Chiefs are going to be able to, be able to score against the Colts. And I think that their defense is prepared for what the Colts like to do on offense, because they prepared for it before.
Surprise, surprise to no one.
There it
The
is.
pick has been flipped to the Kansas City Chiefs. I think the point you made about the fact that it's kind of go time for the Chiefs here. Like you kind of got to come out and like win some games, but like put your foot down and win some games, if that makes sense. So if the extra half point kind of scared me a little, it's okay. Can't be scared of that.
Well,
Offense could be
it's worth mentioning, right, that this line opened 3, and so it has been bet up. We talk about where the line was, where it is, and where it could be. We have already seen essentially -3, which is often a line when it's -3, it just kind of stays there, right?
Yeah.
Because it means like the sports books are obviously on a key number, and it takes a lot to get them off of it. And the fact that this is drifted off, and you can still get like -3 at -120, right? Depends on the sports book that you're using and the time that you're using it. But like at -3.5, like this is a move off of that key number, which tells me that like the early money is on the Chiefs. And a lot of the time, right, the early money is often the sharper of that money.
Super interesting stuff. Chiefs -3.5 there. And speaking of line movement, it's interesting because I did a lot of these lines last night. And then before we do the pod, I go back through and see what's changed and what hasn't changed. This line stayed the same, sitting on 3. You got the Bears, who are at home as 3-point favorites against the Steelers. Bears last week won another close one against Minnesota. They did not cover, but it's all right. Swift was a beast behind like he just continues. I guess we talked so much about Ben Johnson and what he would do to Caleb, but we didn't really realize like what he would do for Swift's season, who's having a monster year with Ben Johnson calling the plays and pounding the rock. Caleb versus the blitz. I mean, the numbers last week were insane what they tried to do to Caleb. The Vikings just crazy blitz rate against him, and he did pretty well avoiding it. I mean, I don't know if that's great preparation or what that was, but he did a good job. Didn't really get much help from his receivers. There were a lot of bad drops. They were helped out by a huge special teams play, but they just keep winning games. Do I like them as 3-point favorites? I think that's kind of a lot of points, but maybe the reason for that could be the injury to Aaron Rodgers. Assumption is he's out with the wrist injury. Steelers defense played good, but that was against the Bengals, who had their own issues last week. Mason Rudolph's music is getting louder here as we could be heading into that game. And I think the reason I'm on the Steelers in this one is just because I think the number's too high. And this is another one where we're talking backup quarterbacks. Mason Rudolph, not that he's great, but he's serviceable. And especially for what the Steelers do anyways, like, all right. I don't think the drop off is as massive as the named headline Aaron Rodgers to Mason Rudolph at this stage of Aaron Rodgers' career is, worth this big gap. Like, I don't think the gap between these two teams is that much. So I'm starting here on the points with the Steelers.
Okay, so this is the interesting thing, Shell. Like, I mean, it's tricky because, for one, we went into last week's game. We talked about it, right? We're like, the Bears didn't get any credit for beating the Giants because they were down 10 at home to Jackson Dart. Jackson Dart goes out, and it's Russell Wilson, and it sort of allows them effectively to get back in the game and win the game. And so the market was like, I don't really think that's all that impressive. Meanwhile, like, the Vikings actually got a bit of a bump coming from being 4.5-point underdogs, didn't win, didn't cover against the Ravens. And then they get kind of this bump where they open -3 in that game. So, the market gobbles up the Bears at +3, and it sits basically at -2.5 throughout the week, which is still that circumstance where the Bears don't get any credit and the Vikings were getting credit. And so, again, whether you call it credit or whether you call it a matchup potential that you like, that's, 6 and 1/2 dozen in the other. Again, watching that game closely is watching, almost all the games super closely. Like, JJ McCarthy, like, it just, man, it's so, again, young quarterback, right? Like, it's super frustrating. And so the point is like, I mean, how much are you giving the Bears, again, more credit? And so the market appears to be giving the Bears a fair amount of sort of credit, and at least allowing them back to the idea that they might be an average team. Because you and I talked about it, we're like, they're 6-3, and they're not even rated as a 50 out of 100, which is our quite literal sort of standard bear for being an average team. But like, you start using market ratings to or using, I should say, look ahead lines to kind of tweak around with the market ratings, and their line for next week against the Eagles, tough game on the road, like, hasn't really changed from before the season, when again there was relatively high hopes for the Bears. All that is to say, like, we got the Bears now rated as an average team. And so the interesting thing, as I circle all the way around to this, is that this line that you can find some 2.5s, -2.5 at -115. Like, it's been -2.5, excuse me, for much of the week. You mentioned obviously the Aaron Rodgers to Mason Rudolph thing. There isn't, we always go like, is this a Rodgers line or a Rudolph line? If this is a Rudolph line, again, Rodgers, 43 years old or whatever he is, it got a broken left wrist or whatever it is, like, he's gonna play. This line is like, has downgraded the Steelers like from 50 to like 48. This isn't Stroud to Mills. This isn't some of these other like massive drops. And so when you say, like, I don't think that Rodgers down to Rudolph is a massive downgrade, neither does the betting market. Because even if both of these teams are, think about it this way, if both of these teams are rated as like dead nuts even average, right? Like 50 out of 100, you'd give 1.5 to the Bears for home field advantage, and the line would be 1.5. So if this is just what the number is, if Mason Rudolph is starting, I mean, I gotta feel like there actually is a bigger gap between Rodgers and Rudolph than that. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know that it's like, if you're telling me it's massive, but it's, you know what I mean? Like, it's one thing to say that there isn't massive, and I don't think there is a massive, but I think there's more than like a couple of rating points for a Steelers team that I don't really still think is all that particularly good. And so, again, if my whole thing with some of these better teams is kind of like the just win baby attitude, and you have to give them credit for just winning some of these games, I should probably at least start doing it with the Bears. And again, part of it is like, we're waiting around for them to go on the road and beat a decent team. Not some of like the teams that we listed last week, I think, where it's like, oh, this team are all the teams that they've beaten. It's like, okay, there's nothing really all that impressive. Like, battling away, and again, they almost lost that game, but like, battling away and winning that game was at least somewhat impressive. And so again, like, we're talking about a number that was 2.5, ticking up towards 3, obviously some like juice in play and all of that sort of thing as well. But again, I'm interested to see what happens here, because if Rodgers gets ruled out and this doesn't become 3.5, 4, and like, once it breaks through 3, right, like, it can run a little bit. If we know that Rudolph is going to be the guy who's playing in this game, like, it could get to 4.5. And that's the thing. Like, if it got to 6 or something like that, now we're having the conversation about like, it can't be this much of a gap. But right now with Rodgers, and again, I could give my opinion about Rodgers and sort of the idea of him sort of playing the super teammate card here of being like, he's trying, like, what's the phrase, right? Like he's working towards playing, or he's trying to play, or he's,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like there's that phrase that is clearly, somebody texted to somebody else, and now everybody just kind of runs with it to kind of make it look like their guy can play. It's like, you've got a broken left arm. Like either you can play or you can't. It doesn't really make any sense that like he's working towards trying to play, or whatever that term is that they use. It's like, it's a yes or no thing at this point. Like you should know whether you can go with the pain that's, potentially inflicted, unless you're trying to be that guy who is going to sort of save the day, and he wasn't able to go, like he tried so hard.
Yeah.
And it's like, if there was ever a quarterback who could sort of run that, sort of playbook down the line here over the course of this week, it's certainly Raj. So again, like if you're betting it right this second, and you can grab a 2.5, minus 2.5 at like minus 115, I don't know why you wouldn't do that, because what's the worst that happens?
Yeah.
Roger says that he's in. The line goes to 1.5.
Yeah.
Right. And you aren't really losing that much. And they're starting a quarterback with a broken left wrist. Right. So it's like, I think I would just take the Bears and see where that goes.
The tough part here, right? And I'm going to switch the pick to the Bears, but the reason I'm going to switch the pick to the Bears is just because the what you laid out in terms of where the line could be going, depending on what happens next, right? Because the reminder of whenever someone's listening to this pod is that we're recording this on Wednesday morning, right? So by the time Sunday rolls around, I mean, there's going to be more updates on Thursday and then Friday. And as you mentioned, Rodgers might be riding this out all the way until Sunday, right? So just so that he can give Adam Schefter the scoop on what's going on, right? So I say that to say what you laid out in terms of, taking the line now and knowing that, hey, if Mason Rudolph comes in and now you're looking at a plus 4.5 or something in the Vegas zone, we're talking a different story. But if you can get the 3 now, let's roll with that. I like that. The Bears, you're right. I'm hesitant to give the Bears credit when the reality might be we are seeing the more buttoned up version of this team with Ben Johnson as they continue to win games that we've seen the Bears lose for decades. Right?
You're allowed to improve. Yeah, we say all the time, right? You're allowed to get better. And if there was ever a team, everybody uses learning curve, and most of the time they use it wrong. But like quite literally, this is what learning curve is, right? Like it is the curve to which the further you go along here with knowledge and experience, the better that you get. The curve gets greater. And so, you talked about like DeAndre Swift. It's like DeAndre Swift is just Ben Johnson's discount version of Jahmyr Gibbs.
Yeah.
And Kyle Monangai is just a maybe even better at this point version of David Montgomery.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's Sonic and Knuckles like knockoff Atari version instead of like the Sega version, or whatever that was from back when Sonic the Hedgehog was at his prime. So, again, it's going to take some time here. I'm more confident in the Bears and Ben Johnson than I am Aaron Glenn and the New York Jets. And Glenn's supposed to, institute this like order of discipline and whatever in that franchise. It's like, I don't know, man. It looks to me that Ben Johnson's more of a hard ass than Aaron Glenn is, unless we're of course talking about, talking to the media, in which case they're both kind of out there. Yeah, fair. I wasn't going to go there, but not untrue.
It happens. Pick switched. Chicago Bears -3 is the call there. As we move on to the Dallas Cowboys, who are at home against Philadelphia Eagles. Eagles laying 3 points. Eagles, as mentioned earlier in the pod, win ugly, but depending on how much you love defensive football, that's how ugly you're going to think their wins are, right? But I think the Lions are good. I just think, the Eagles make other teams not look that good because the Eagles are a really, really, really serious team. Here's my question, though, right? Here's my question.
Yeah.
The good teams, right? They make the other teams look bad. Cool. The Cowboys, right? Like, could the Eagles play better? Of course. Could they look a lot better on offense? Of course. Bottom line is they win. The flip side is you get the Cowboys. Cowboys with a nice win against the Raiders. But again, this is a weight class thing to me, and I think this line should be way higher than 3 points. You could talk me into betting the Eagles at like 6.5, and I'd still be laying the points here with the Eagles. I don't think the Cowboys are that good. I think the Cowboys are a team where their offense might be all right, but I'm not buying more into the Cowboys because of what they did to the Raiders last week. We'll just say that, right?
Sure.
And if you know, I'll just say that. I'll stay there. I'll stay there. And I'll just say Eagles -3 against the Cowboys. I just don't see the Cowboys being able to do this here. And I think if there's a defense that can help the woes of the Eagles offense, why can't it be the Cowboys?
Yeah, well, I think the Cowboys would make the argument that the reinforcements that they've had for that last game on Monday night are the reason why that, like, maybe it's not an abject atrocity, right?
Fair.
And so the problem with the Cowboys defense up until this point, the sort of glaring problem with the Cowboys defense, is that you could score from distance on the Cowboys.
Yes.
And so we know in the NFL, outside of like basically the two teams that we mentioned, maybe there's a couple others you could throw in there from a defensive perspective, other than the Broncos and the Eagles, most of these teams are like giving you the field goal, right? Like, we are playing until you can get to the red zone, and then we're going to shut things down from there. Like, everything about the defense is designed for that, because, by the way, like, guys are kicking 57-yard field goals with ease, right? So it's like, it's not even, oh man, like, we got to keep guys, the other team outside of the 20 or the 30. It's like, no, you got to keep them outside of the 40-yard line to prevent them from kicking a field goal. So honestly, what's the difference between that team getting to the 37-yard line or the 7-yard line? It's probably going to result in 3 points either way. And so my point is, with the Cowboys, teams are scoring. The Bears, the Russell Wilson and the Giants, people were scoring from like 40 yards out, like touchdowns from 40 yards out. Like, we didn't even get to the point where the field was shrunk.
Yeah.
Right? It was like, oh, sorry, we couldn't shrink the field because, like, there's a guy just running into the end zone behind us. It's like, well, that really defeats the whole purpose of, like, keep everything in front of you and let's force the other team to kick a bunch of field goals. I think with the defensive additions that they've made, and again, it's tough because Quinnen Williams comes in. He hasn't played in 2 weeks, or 3 weeks. He's, he had the double bye. He had the bye from playing for the Jets and then the bye from playing for the Cowboys. What a sweet deal that is.
Super
He
fresh.
gets to come in super fresh, and he gets to play, like, in front of all of these guys who've got their own thing going on, right? He doesn't have that thing. He wasn't on the team before that. But he gets to sort of show out. And by the way, he also gets to play against undrafted free agent offensive linemen who, the Raiders are just moving stuff around on their offensive line. That's like, guys, this is not working at all. And Ashton Genty's going backwards on every carry. So I say all that to say, like, I get that I say all that because you go, okay, well, like, it doesn't look like the Cowboys are going to be able to do that this week. Lane Johnson's out for the Eagles. It seems like on a weekly basis, quarterly basis, the interior of the Eagles defense is like doing that, like, the offensive linemen are doing that, like, weird walk on the sideline where they're like holding their hip. You know what I mean? Like, can you picture like a 270-pound guy kind of holding his hands at his hips, kind of doing that, like, soft walk to try to figure out whether his, like, knee is still attached or his, like, hip socket is correct or his lower back. And it's just like, is Landon Dickerson going to play in this game? Like, who's going to be the center here or there? And so, there's a possibility here that the Cowboys front is able to actually do pretty well against the Eagles offensive line, which, by the way, has been struggling all year to get room for Saquon Barkley. And of course, we can get into the whole, like, Jalen Hurts passing game, AJ Brown deal or whatever. So, you mentioned, like, is the Cowboys defense going to make everybody look good? And the answer is, like, maybe not this Eagles offense, and not with the, again, reinforcements that they have, because you're getting more snaps of DeMarvion Overshown this week from the Cowboys. And again, Malik Hooker back, getting guys, like, organized to the point where maybe guys aren't getting loose in the secondary in the way that they have this season. And so if it's just a matter of going from, like, the third worst defense in the NFL to, like, the 23rd worst or, like, the 18th worst defense. That's the thing that's held this team back, that you and I have talked all season about. Like, if Dak Prescott's playing like they are an above average team before we do the equation about, like, what's going on with the defense. And so if the defense gets even a little bit better, then all of a sudden that offense can then be allowed to do stuff that isn't like hair on fire. We got to make up for our crappy defense that's just going to allow long bomb touchdowns in 10 seconds before our helmets are even off, coming from, off of the sideline. And so then I go back to obviously the first game of the year, right? In Philadelphia. That game's back and forth. CD Lamb's a couple of drops away from maybe the Cowboys winning that game. And then honestly, the Dallas offense is just so much even better than it was that night.
Yeah.
The Cowboys rating hasn't gotten out of control. The look ahead line for this game was 3.5. They win that game. So if you take their new rating and you apply it backwards to the Raiders game, they would have been -4, -4.5 in that game. Knowing what we know now, we probably would bet the Cowboys in that game at that number.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think it's gotten crazy. Now we're down to 3 here. And again, that's like in sort of reverse of the Chiefs and even the Bears game. This line was 3.5. It reopened at 3.5 and has been bet down to 3. So as much as you're like, I would still bet the Eagles at 5.5, and that might be all correct and true and fair and all that. I'm not saying that it's not. It's that like, I'll put my hand up to say I was in on that +3.5. That's come down to +3 since.
Yeah.
So I'm on the Cowboys here at +3.5 in this game. And I was pretty much instantly, because I think, and again, part of it is spot too. And again, market rating and all that stuff, right? We talked about the Eagles are now into the 70s, and I'm allowing for them to be in the 70s in my own mind because of how good the defense is. But still think the Packers offense is kind of broken. And, again, if we can do the thing about Jared Goff and the outdoors and kind of a tricky spot in that game. And by the way, the Eagles just played 2 games in 6 days where they played, from a defensive perspective, maybe the 2 best games any team has played all season long from a defensive perspective. And so now you're going on the road, fast track Dallas, and you're asking them to play that again. You and I talk about this all the time. It's not a video game. Right? As much as we have all of these numbers and these ratings and all that stuff to sort of make it easier for all of us to kind of understand what we're talking about from a qualitative perspective, turning it into a quantitative thing, it's tough, man. It's tough to win those 2 games where you're sitting there, even with the Cowboys, like it's your rival. Those games against the Packers and the Lions were more important to the Eagles because, again, those are the teams that they're competing with the sort of prospective division champions for the conference. They can lose this game to the Cowboys, turn around, look at the records and be like, we're still 3 games up or whatever they're going to be still with the Cowboys. And so like there is a universe in which there is something of a letdown here for Philadelphia. And if you let down against a capable offense like the Cowboys are, man, like, it's one thing when you got Quinyon Mitchell to go up against the best receiver on the other team, shutting down Amon-Ra St. Brown, shutting down whomever that happens to be on the Packers. And just the fact that, like, we kind of don't even know who that is maybe sort of a bad sign for the Packers. Like, okay, man, go hang out with CD Lamb all day. Just do gassers with CD Lamb all day. Now you got George Pickens, who's frankly probably a better athlete than CD Lamb because he's a better athlete than, like, literally everybody. So, our problem with George Pickens was never like, I don't know that he's got the athleticism for this. It's like, no, it's the other stuff that's been sort of the problem. And so now you go, okay, like Adoree Jackson, you're going to do that with George Pickens, or like maybe Quinyon Mitchell goes to Pickens and now it's Lamb against Adoree Jackson, or one of the other corners. Obviously, Cooper DeJean is certainly an option there, but it's like, ooh, man, like that looks a lot rougher than, even some of these other number 2s throughout the league. So, like, as weird as it is to say, I kind of think the Cowboys are in general a tricky matchup for the Eagles. And I think the spot also sort of really, really helps the Cowboys because I think that, 2 really nice games in 6 days for the Eagles, man, it's tough to make that a third one here.
Super tough spot there. You almost got me there. Almost so close, but not quite. I just can't do it with the Cowboys. Not in this matchup. I know week 1, you were correct. That was a great game for sure, but I got to ride with the Eagles here. We'll keep going though with the Patriots, who are 8.5-point favorites on the road in Cincinnati, taking on the Bengals. I really do want to take the Bengals, but they have no run game and no Jamar Chase after he decided to spit in the face of Jalen Ramsey, which is just like, what are we doing here? So my question is, are they cooked? I don't know. Is the Bengals season cooked? Most likely the answer is yes, but the Pats, opposite of cooked. They are continuing to roll. 8.5 points is a lot, but I just continue to be impressed by the Patriots, and I'm going to keep rolling with the Patriots, and I'm going to lay the 8.5 points on the road with the New England Patriots.
Oh boy. Well, I think we found the correct rating for the Patriots, right? I think they played sort of a very average game on Thursday night against the Jets. That number came all the way out to 13. I think it was certainly less than It was certainly less than that when you and I spoke
12
on
and a half
Wednesday morning.
when we spoke.
Yeah. So it ends up closing 13. So they cover, I always say, right? Like nobody's betting minus 13 on the Patriots.
It was
right?
13 and a half. It was 13 and a half, then down to 12 and a half. Yes. Then to 13.
Yeah. So you're either betting that 13 and a half and you're finding that top of the market, or you're betting it all the way on its way to 13. So, most everybody probably should have won on that game. But all that is to say, they play an average game. The game lands exactly on the number. I just don't know any other way to sort of in one game prove that the rating for the Patriots, the current rating for the Patriots, is just correct. We did it, everybody. We landed on their correct rating, which to me means anytime it goes up from here, it's probably a fade situation on the Patriots, right?
It.
Or we have to be positive that the Patriots are going to put in a top range type of effort, right? Which is, again, sometimes we just do that, right? We go, the number's probably too high, but we think there's sort of a top level effort here. I don't know that I've got that in the cards for this week. I don't really sort of know what the angle is on why the Patriots are going to play great in this game. And so then we go to the Bengals. And so look ahead line for this was 5.5. So very easily we go, what's the difference between the two scenarios? Well, one is minus Jamar Chase, who, one, idiot for spitting on somebody. You're disgusting. Two, almost a bigger idiot for trying to tell everybody that you didn't do it when there's for all of the spitting incidents that we've had, this is the most spit we've seen on camera, I think. I don't know where how we're gonna go about testing this, but it seemed like it was super obvious, more so than some of these other situations where you only kind of sort of see it.
Yeah.
This is blatant. So don't lie to my face. It's like anything else, right? Just don't lie to us. So the point is 5.5 to 8.5. That's not just 3 points.
It's a lot.
It's 3 points through all the key numbers, right? The whole gang of key numbers, the 6, the 7, and the 8. So, I mean, this is one where it's is Jamar Chase worth that much when it's not an injury to a quarterback? We've already done that with the Bengals, right? We've already taken that trip with the Bengals. And so to get to 8.5, knowing that we feel like we have a stable rating for the Patriots, the Bengals are back down from a rating perspective to 22 out of 100, right? And so it's so either the Patriots have to find a way to play through the top of their range at essentially their best game of the year, right? Everything moves with the rating, right? So if you keep outplaying your rating and the rating changes with you, then you then have to outplay that rating again. So they either have to do that, or the Bengals have to play on the same level as the New York Jets and the Tennessee Titans, which are currently 21 and 20 right now for their respective rating.
Okay.
And Joe Flacco is still playing, to the best of my knowledge, so it isn't Jake Browning. And, again, depends on how much you can kind of talk the locker room into Joe Burrow's music coming for Thursday night against the Ravens. And if you still think that that game might be the difference in sort of catapulting the Bengals season. I will say the Bengals defense, again, this might be a Steelers thing. This might be an Aaron Rodgers thing, at which point makes it even less appetizing to potentially bet the Steelers this week. But the Bengals defense was actually pretty decent against the Steelers. Pretty decent, meaning still below average, right? But that game came down to Joe Flacco throwing the wrong pass at the wrong time and a pick six happening in a 2-point game when the Bengals were basically in field goal range, right? You don't throw that pick, you kick a field goal, you're up by 1. Instead, you're down by 9, and now you're in some big trouble on the road against the Steelers pass rush and some of those players on their defense. And so, again, scoreboard, you look at it and you're man, the Bengals are cooked. And again, listen, we're getting to that point in the season. We might already be there. We're clearly already there with the Bengals, where we're asking, is this team cooked? What does this team have to play for? Motivation, schmotivation, all of that stuff, right? And what happens more often than not, never 100% of the time, but more often than not, the pride of being an NFL football player, playing for your career, your money, your family. Why are we doing this? Why are any of us doing this? Is, your job. And so, like, it's still the Bengals' job to play football and to get on a team for next year, to stay on this team for next year, regardless of whether you want to do the math about like how in contention they might be in this division. Which again, it would have been crazy if even if losing that game, if the Browns pull off a win against the Ravens last week, which is like a whole other deal, like it might have gotten even weirder. So, again, I think that the number just doesn't add up to laying it here with the Patriots. Dude, it doesn't mean I'm dying to be betting on the Bengals. Like, don't get me wrong, but like I think I've spelled out why this number is sort of as high as it is. I will also mention 8.5. Start having conversations about knocking this thing down to 2.5 and just requiring a pretty buttoned up outfit in the Patriots to sort of play an average game and just win. Well, I could see that. I can also see Joe. I mean, Joe Flacco is just a less fun version of Jameis Winston, man. Like he's going to throw you in it, and he's going to throw you out of it, and like stuff can happen along the way.
Yeah. Nope. I hear you. Pick has been flipped to the Bengals.
Oh, we did it.
8.5 points is a lot of points. 8.5 points on the road for the Patriots is a lot of points.
Tons.
And I mean, expectations are one thing, and now the Patriots have expectations, but the expectation to win by 8.5 points is a lot. So,
that's right.
Pick switched. We will keep the train moving though and head out to Arizona, where the Cards are 3-point dogs to the Jacksonville Jaguars. And the Jags just bullied the Chargers last week. And, they didn't even punt in what was it, 35-6 victory.
Yeah.
I'm going to be very honest here, okay?
Sure.
I just have a massive hate on the Jags. And it's sitting here. You can see the graphic says Arizona +3. And the reason I'm on Arizona is because I feel like the Jags continue to be the team that no matter what I do, I'm just on the other side of them. And right when I buy into them, this is a thing going back years and years and years. Right when I buy into them, they let me down. And this would be a buy-in scenario here. We're coming off a massive win against the Chargers, and now you're going to Arizona, a team that you probably should beat. And I should be able to take the Jags to lay a field goal on the road, but I'm just not going to do it. I'm on Jacoby Brissett, fresh off his setting a passing attempts record. But the reality is, all jokes aside, I thought the Cardinals didn't look too bad last week. They were just down in a blink of an eye. You give up a big time kick return on the first play of the game, and it's 13-0 right away. Just a tough spot to be in with Jacoby Brissett, right? So, and no Marvin Harrison in that game. Give me the points here. Give me the points.
Yeah, and I think the Marvin Harrison point is a good one in a weird way because, you mentioned the Jacoby Brissett, and it's like he's still able to complete some passes without Marvin Harrison. Yeah. Right? He's still throwing it around there, and the Cardinals move the ball, right? And you mentioned it. So it's like when we talk about, even going back to the Jamar Chase conversation, when we talk about some of these receivers, these high-end receivers, listen, you can debate whether Marvin Harrison even qualifies in that department, but just going they're really cool. And again, fun to watch, fantasy football, all that good stuff. But how much does it really hurt the offense when they're out, right? Because somebody else gets an opportunity to play and so on and so forth, right? So Brissett obviously throws the ball a ton. They make, obviously a ton of completions, ton of yardage, all of that stuff. And so it's like, well, that worked even without Marvin Harrison. So I'm not going to beat them up. I'm not going to knock the Cardinals rating down without Marvin Harrison. You have to basically just do it on the result for last week. And you mentioned the result for last week being an immediately difficult scenario where not only do you get that, kickoff return that gets converted into the touchdown immediately, you also have a 49ers team that, again, Shaw, you can sort of speak to this, how you sort of feel about it, because we know it's a hot topic in your life, so to speak. But like, team looked like it's got a lot of energy on the offensive side with Brock Purdy back, man. Like, again, he wasn't lighting it up necessarily, but he was putting it in like George Kittle's hands. He's putting it in Christian McCaffrey's hands. He's doing the right thing with all of that sort of stuff. And I guess we'll talk more about that when we get to the San Francisco portion of this
Oh, we
program.
will. Oh, we will.
A tease for the end of the show. So again, I don't really want to downgrade the Cardinals off
Yeah.
of that. They had some injury issues. They've got, Mac Wilson's, gone to IR. Again, debatable on how much you think he necessarily matters, but it looks like they'll be a little bit healthy at the healthier, I should say, at the cornerback position this week. Max Melton, Will Johnson still questionable for this game. Again, it's Wednesday. Who really knows? We'll kind of knock on wood from that. Fundamentally, I think this game is kind of the same thing, but on the other side for the Jaguars last week, right? Like the vibes were not particularly high for the Jags. And we talked about it. It's a vibes off, right? Where it's bad vibes, good vibes. It goes right down to is this team cooked? And you can throw all of these buzzwords into the category of frankly bull feathers that don't really matter, that you and I just kind of talk about because it's only Wednesday morning and we're still off of the recency of Sunday. But by the time Friday rolls around and that comes further in, by the wayside, it matters less in our sort of mind's eye. And so sure enough, now the Jags go from being 3-point home underdogs, and this is a classic situation, right? We've I don't know if we say it all the time, but we should probably say it more when it happens. If you go from a home underdog to a road favorite, it means there's been a massive change in your perception off of one game. And it kind of doesn't really matter who the opponents necessarily are. And by the way, all these opponents are all just kind of in the middle of the league, right? With the Chargers being without their two best offensive linemen and just an absolute tatter of a unit that can't block for Justin Herbert. I'm sorry, the Chargers are just not, at best, an average team. In the same way that the team that they played the week before, the Steelers, can be an average team who just doesn't play very well one week and plays a little bit better the next week and then probably doesn't play well the week after that, and so on and so forth. Because all these teams are going to end up 8-8 going into like week 18, right? Like, or vice, it's some sort of form or fashion, or like 8-8 against the spread at the very least, right? So it's not a great spot to take the Jags because they just did the good stuff. But we know the Jags don't do the good stuff all the time. So like, why would we expect 2 straight good games out of the out of the Jags doing the good stuff?
Yeah,
that sounds insane, right? So to me, it's the Cardinals getting a second home game in a row here, getting a second chance, to sort of not blow that game essentially in the first quarter against a Jags team who, like, listen, if Trevor Lawrence just starts throwing the ball to the other team all day, would you be all that shocked, right? Like, the Cardinals could win this game by 20 points. And if you're sitting around going, I can't believe that happened, like, that's probably a you problem. Because, of course, that could happen in the same way, frankly, the Jags could win by 20 if they're able to parlay last week into another good week. But again, when do we ever see that for the Jacksonville Jaguars? So it's just a matter of, honestly, price shopping, how you want to play the game. If 2.5 is the more prominent line, maybe you hit the old teaser leg, the game that we just mentioned. Yep. Or maybe if we get like a flat 3 at -110, maybe a decent injury report, we make sure that both corners for the Cardinals are healthy, particularly Will Johnson, and then you can get like a flat 3. Like, I would be super down with that as well.
No, totally with you. Totally with you. Interesting game there for sure. I wonder though too, just Jacoby Brissett, let him cook. Just let Jacoby cook. No, I'm joking.
I mean, they might as well.
They might as well.
He's honestly, he's the best thing they have going.
It's fair. We move on to the Packers and the Vikings, an NFC North showdown. Packers laying 6.5 points at home. Jordan Love, it was a weird one last week. The winds were kind of crazy. He had missed field goals. He had like weird passes being dropped by receivers and DBs. We got a Malik Willis sighting, and then he did enough that, Love was able to come back in the game and make the plays late. The difference, though, I think, was the Packers defense overall. And that's where we get to this game where you have the Packers defense going against, as you mentioned, JJ McCarthy, who did not look good last week much at all for the majority of the game. You got Jefferson pouting again on the sidelines, the fans booing JJ McCarthy. There's not a lot going on here with the Vikings. And I know it seems like piling on, right? Because it's a divisional matchup, but I'm going to lay the touchdown with the Packers here. I know it's not a touchdown. It's 6.5, which makes it even more appealing to me.
Yeah, you're going to need the touchdown. You're going to need that thing converted. That's interesting. You surprised me a little bit here because your voice is the one that I heard going into that Eagles game 2 weeks ago, which was, what have the Packers done? You know what I mean? To ... right? Like to deserve like
they still haven't done much
levels of sort of still haven't done much.
No.
And yet you're like, let's do it. Let's lay the 6.5. My case for not doing that would be, well, one, like a familiarity with the Packers offense and the matchup, right? Like we talked last week, I think it was, about like divisional familiarities and all of these teams. Like it doesn't really matter when all these coaches are carouseling around and they don't actually have sort of familiarity. Well, like Packers and Vikings have some pretty decent familiarity, right? Like the coaches have been the same. You know, Brian Flores has been the defensive coordinator for the Vikings for, a little while here now, and has gone up against, Matt LaFleur, who's, by the way, offensive creativity wasn't exactly lighting the world on fire last week, 6 days after everybody was like, hey, man, like we could use a little bit more here. Again, the best thing that Matt LaFleur might do is go to the Malik Willis playbook.
I was going to say, coach up
like
Malik
it's all of a
Willis.
sudden, right? It's like, we can he just like rips it off like he's like a coiled notebook, and he just like rips off the page, and he like, or like some assistant, like some 22-year-old kid is like ripping off the page like from the locker room and is like running out with it, like waving over his hand, like, I got the Malik Willis stuff. We can run the wing T for the rest of the game. And you're like, and it's super kind of fun because like, they're getting the ball down the field one way or another. And that's probably sort of, down grading Malik Willis more than we necessarily should. But like Malik Willis, by the way, currently might still be the best Titans quarterback of the last like 5 years. If he still played for them anyway. Wow. Which is, really a drag if you're a Titans fan, but it's also like not the most inaccurate thing ever.
Will Levis is going to be very mad at you.
I'm fine with that. So anyway, last year's games, a 2-point game and a 2-point game. And so last year, they had Sam Darnold instead, and yada, yada, yada. I think my point to all of this is like JJ McCarthy played god awful for 3 quarters last week, and they had the lead with like a minute and change to go.
Yeah.
And I guess my hope here is that like JJ McCarthy plays 2.5 good quarters. and maybe that's asking a lot, but it's like, we talked about the Vikings part again. And I think because the Vikings got kind of a little bit of an upgrade there was the expectation that they were going to play a good game, and the expectation that they wouldn't false start 8 times like they did the week before, and that they, wouldn't do this or wouldn't do that, wouldn't fumble a kickoff return. And they didn't do either of those things. And again, they almost kind of won, but they almost won despite the quarterback being pretty brutal. And so if the expectation every week is that JJ McCarthy is going to be pretty brutal, then no, like, I don't really want anything to do with the Vikings, like going forward or ever again. But I think I've got enough sort of faith in the combination of the defense being able to play well against the Packers and JJ McCarthy and Kevin O'Connell doing just enough. And maybe it's taking a step back, making, a couple of easier throws and, so on and so forth. That, like, if it's just a little bit better, if we can just get, and the Vikings toggle between slightly below average and slightly above average. And it's honestly based on just whatever quarterback play they're getting. Whether it's a decent Carson Wentz game or a horrific Carson Wentz game, whether it's a good 1 quarter of JJ McCarthy or 2 to maybe even 3 good quarters out of JJ McCarthy. And so, I just think like this is that kind of thing where, if you want to use the cliches, I think you need to put them in certain spots. And I think this cliche about the division familiarity and stuff, I think it very much applies to this matchup, where I don't necessarily believe that with, I don't know, we start pairing up teams in all of the other divisions. I'd say it's maybe like 50% of the time it actually kind of applies. And I think this does apply. And so I think you're in for another close game between these two teams. I think people are going to be surprised that the Vikings are in this game. They're going to be surprised that JJ McCarthy has like a decent game, and they're going to be surprised that this game comes down to a field goal. And maybe you shouldn't be surprised when the Packers miss a field goal, because the Packers often miss field goals because they hire bad field goal kickers most of the time.
Yeah, this is one where this is going to come back and bite me in the ass next week when we sit down and do this pod. The tag at the beginning, sometimes I listen, sometimes I don't. This is one where I'm not listening because of JJ McCarthy. Like, I need to see him do this again. I need to see him do like good things again. And then I'll be on it. And then I'll be, more likely to flip that pick. But we will keep moving though. We'll keep moving. We got a big game here. Well, a big spread, I should say. The Giants, who are on the road in Detroit to take on the Lions. Lions laying 10 points at home. The Lions, as mentioned, lost to the Eagles, but I think the Eagles are still really, really good. Lions never look good outside of their dome, or rarely look good outside of their dome. I also wonder why they just don't hand the ball off to Jahmyr Gibbs a lot more. But hey, that's a story for another day. The Giants ran the ball a lot, made things look really easy and good for Jameis Winston. I thought he was okay. I don't even think that late pick was on Jameis. I think he did enough here. And I know traditionally this is when we love to take Jameis. Jameis as a huge underdog, but not in this matchup against the Lions coming back home after some tough outings. This just screams, Lions beat down. And every time you're watching a game, they're doing the Fox update and there's someone, Jameson Williams, running into the end zone, Jahmyr Gibbs running into the end zone, just over and over again in this game. Lions roll. Give me the Lions -10 here.
Yeah, massive game for like the Lions speed guys, right? And the whole Jahmyr Gibbs thing, forget even just handing him the ball. Like the whole not throwing the ball to Jahmyr Gibbs 3 times a quarter drives me insane. Like he should be with Christian McCaffrey.
I was just going to say the Christian McCaffrey
who are like like among the league leaders in receiving. You know what I mean? You're like, Christian McCaffrey's like 4th in receiving. Like, what? And it's like, yeah, he is. And so should Jahmyr Gibbs, because that guy single-handedly beat me last week on a Jared Goff under passing yards prop. And if I said to you, if you watched the entire game and I said to you, I have Jared Goff under passing yards, you'd be like, this is one of the great prop bets of all time, with the exception of he would throw the ball like 5 feet to Jahmyr Gibbs, and then Jahmyr Gibbs would just run for 40 yards with it, and he got half of his passing yards on Jahmyr Gibbs dump offs. And you're like, that's not how this is supposed to work. But Jahmyr Gibbs is awesome. And so that's why we got jammed on that one in a big way. And so that was infuriating. But you go like, yeah, I did actually think Jahmyr Gibbs was going to have a good passing, or I should say receiving yards game. Didn't think 100 was going to be in the cards here. If it took that for the Lions to be like, we should throw the ball to Jahmyr Gibbs a little bit more, then the Giants are really in big trouble, because honestly, it took them, half a season to realize that they should throw the ball to Jameson Williams a little bit more. And again, like, you've got these 2 freak show weapons that you just have to get the ball to. And it took them 8 weeks to essentially do that for both of those guys. So that's really kind of annoying when it comes to the Lions. And so, you mentioned it, indoors, outdoors, the difference there, and sort of the ability to be able to get those guys the ball. I think you're going to get big plays out of both of those guys. I agree with everything that you said, with the exception of the Jameis Winston thing. And it's like one of those like Christmas movies. It's the Christmas movie where there's almost like a 2 different timeline type of thing, or like a like a Christmas Carol deal where it's like Ghost of Christmas Past, Present, or Future, and like the alternative, the Ghost of Jameis Past throws the touchdown pass in that game, and then throws like a 2-point conversion to like win the game, or they win it in overtime, right? And then we're on the show going like, Jameis is so much fun. Like, I love this team with Jameis, da 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 da. And then we bet on the Giants the next week, and you get Ghost of Jameis future. And it's 4 interceptions and the super close up of Jameis, and he snaps the helmet off, or the chin strap off, and you're just like, I can't believe I got suckered into Jameis. Except when you go to that timeline, the pass gets intercepted last week.
Mm-hmm.
And you're sitting there going like, that's not how this movie was supposed to end.
Yeah.
That's not how the Christmas Carol goes. Jameis Winston throws a touchdown there. And so instead, we're sort of, what we would have been normally getting is this was going to be the disappointing game from Jameis after the sort of heroic game. Now, that doesn't mean that because he had the disappointing game last week that he gets the heroic game this week. It just might mean the Jameis thing is over. Like, it's just not gonna be a thing, right? And like maybe that also means that like it's next week for Jameis, but like they also play, gosh, who do they play? They play somebody good. I think it's New England they play next week. I think it's like a Monday night game against New England. So it's like, it's exactly what it is before their bye week. So I think you probably get Jameis for the next 2 weeks, and I think it probably doesn't go particularly well in either of those games. And we were all just kind of robbed of the first act, or whatever you want to sort of do, of the Christmas movie of Jameis Winston last week, because that felt like a game where, I mean, listen, he's sneaking in touchdowns, right? Paying off anybody.
He's Harlem shaking. He's doing the Harlem shake.
Just,
that was awesome.
Yeah. And it's just the pass goes to the other team at the end. And you're just like, well, that is Christmas canceled? Like, that's not the way this was supposed to go, guys. It just kind of felt like we just kind of missed a holiday tradition or something like that.
It's all right, Jameis. It's all right. We'll go from a Lions -10 bet against Jameis to one of Jameis's former teams, the Saints. The Saints, who are at home and laying 1.5 against the Falcons. Michael Penix is out again. Shocker to everyone. And I say that as someone who in a 2-quarterback fantasy league decided to make my second quarterback Michael Penix Jr. and be like, yeah, this will be the year. He'll stay healthy. No, I never believed that. That's why I also had Kirk Cousins just sitting there waiting for the Penix injury. I'm depressed now.
How you feeling about that?
Drake London also out late. I need to know if he's going to be back in this game. That will be a big deal to me. He's out. I'm just getting the look from Matt here. He's out.
I gave him the thumb.
Just not good. Tough OT loss to the Panthers. Bijan had so many insane runs, much like we talked about Jahmyr Gibbs. How about you just let Bijan do more stuff? How about that? They need an offensive coordinator. Maybe Kirk Cousins just knows what's good for him and just dump it down, check downs to Bijan every time. I wouldn't even be mad at you, Kirk Cousins. Now you're playing the Saints off a bye. I probably should be on the Saints here, shouldn't
I? Listen, the Saints have a minus next to their name meaning like they're,
which is why I'm on the Falcons for the record. Like the immediate move to the Falcons was based off. Wait, the Saints are favored against someone. There has to be a rule.
Yeah.
Anytime the Saints or Panthers are favored, just take the other team.
Yeah. No, then that's what I'm saying. Like, I cannot disagree with you there. Man, I got to tell you, I don't know that I've been as disappointed in a team that I have no other stake
you don't
in.
Care about
right?
Falcons.
I certainly don't care about the Atlanta Falcons. I don't have any, I guess my point is I don't have any like futures on them where I was like, listen, we're in college football season right now, right? Where it's like, we're on the brink of like, hey, yo, if you just win this game as a 10-point favorite, you're going to make us money in the futures market with like this conference or this, college football playoff berth or this, that, or whatever, right? Like it is right in front of you. Fill in the blank team, Duke Blue Devils, South Florida Bulls, et cetera, et cetera. And like, they just never do, it seems like. And you're like, yeah, you couldn't have won as a 10-point favorite like that. Like, we're not even asking you to pull off like an upset here. And so it's not like that for the Falcons last week. That had no bearing on anything other than just a singular bet.
Yeah.
On the Atlanta Falcons -3.5. And they get to the position where they get to make the kick to go up 5. And then it's just a matter of like, hey, let's just stop Bryce Young. And I knew it. 2 weeks ago, I think I started doing it. Do you know what I'm talking about here? Where I was just saying Bryce Young sucks. Like I don't, I never just like I never just blanket statement a guy like that. And I'm saying it because of what I think of the rest of the team. Like there's a reason that I was sort of being so, black and
Yeah.
white or sort of pronounceful
Matter of
about
fact.
like matter of fact. Yeah. Because it's more about everybody else on the Panthers. And yet, like, I allowed myself to believe that the Falcons could, at the very least, after taking a 21-7 lead, blowing that lead, I thought that the defense could at least stop Bryce Young when he needs to throw the football, and they could not do that. And so again, sometimes I say like, hey, like I wish I knew more about football and like the X's and O's of football. And if there's somebody out there that can tell me, hey, like the Falcons defense just couldn't work against Bryce Young, but it's absolutely going to work this week against the Saints. Now, again, I say that as I say it, I go like, it could probably work against the Saints. Like everybody else's defense works against the Saints. But, Tyler Shuck played that nice game and he gets a couple of weeks. And as we say, you're allowed to improve, and this should be an opportunity for him to improve and get like sort of a better handle on the playbook and so on and so forth. So that's why the Saints are favored here. But it's not like the Saints rating has gone through the roof. It's more because the Falcons rating, and like it's 1.5. Shal, what does that mean? It means the Falcons and the Saints are rated the same.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, with Kirk Cousins and no Drake London, like I really don't like the Falcons offense at that point. And we just talked about the defense not being able to stop Bryce Young at home, which again is a putrid sentence to even have to say out loud. And again, I don't even care about the Atlanta Falcons. So again, like what's my reasoning for betting on the Falcons other than just kind of like, I don't think the Saints should be favored against anybody. But if you're going to strip the Falcons for parts here, meaning like the defense isn't doing much, and honestly, the defense hasn't been the same since the loss of Divine Diablo, who is a guy who could play that sort of hybrid, rush linebacker, blitzing linebacker, can, former safety at Virginia Tech, I believe it was, who can, play in coverage and kind of do both. They lost him for the year, and the defense has not been the same for the Falcons. And so, again, it's crazy that like one Jenga piece could like make the whole thing topple for the Falcons, but like, I don't know, kind of seems like it has in a lot of ways here. So here we are, right? And I don't want to be backing Kirk Cousins on the road because I gave him that opportunity a few weeks ago when he started the last time that Michael Penix was out. And it was like, well, Kirk's had the entire offseason to like make sure the shoulder's strong and the Achilles and the leg and the hip and the shoulder and the this or that. And he sucked. And you're just like, oh, okay, so like it's just kind of probably done for Kirk Cousins. And so maybe he comes back this week, and because it's the Saints and whatever, he has a good game. It's been a long time since we've seen that from Kirk Cousins.
Super
Probably
tough.
Since he was wearing purple.
Yes, a super tough one there, but I'm gonna go down with Kirk Cousins and company, Kirk Haynes and company
What a
in
sentence.
that one. From one interesting quarterback matchup to another interesting quarterback matchup, and that would be the Browns versus the Raiders. And I mean, yeah, is it Shedeur Sanders time? I don't know if the internet can handle Shedeur Sanders time. I really don't know if the internet is ready for this.
I don't know. Josina Anderson can handle it.
I forget, what was her line? Against all odds? Is that what it was?
Oh, yeah, the Against All Odds. Yeah.
So good. So good.
Great song.
Can I start off?
Maybe that's
okay.
What you're thinking.
I had this in reverse order in like how I wrote out my notes here, but I just need folks to understand that 99% of the people that are saying good things about Shedeur Sanders are saying that for clicks and for clicks only. Yeah. I'm not saying that even if they firmly believe it, it's just because they don't actually watch football or pay attention to football, and that's okay. And if they don't believe it, they're just doing it for clicks. I'm not saying he's not going to be good in the future, but my point is that these guys don't know better than the people who are watching him every single day in practice and have watched him every single day in practice for the last how long. I don't know if you understand that the NFL is a multi-million-dollar like business for the coaches. Yeah. And so what coach is risking their multi-millions of dollars to be like, you know what? We're not going to play Shedeur Sanders. We're going to make him sit on the bench. That doesn't make any sense, especially for the Browns. Because you know what the Browns have needed for the last however many years? A quarterback. And so why on earth would they finally have a quarterback and then be like, you know what? We're going to make him sit on the bench. That makes no sense. Rant over.
Yes. Cook, brother. Yes. So if you asked every single football team in the NFL, and that includes teams that have a good quarterback right now, what could you possibly want? Like one thing that we could just magically do. Every single one of them would say late round drafted star quarterback. Somebody so insanely cheap for the first 4 years, I guess it would be, of their career, that we could just load up the roster with stuff around them. And honestly, most of these teams try to do it, and they don't even ask the player to be a star. They just ask them not to be a giant screw up. And so that's why the Browns, and everybody makes fun of like, oh, look at how many quarterbacks the Browns have in camp. It's like, yeah, because they're dying to get a quarterback in here that like can work. And because it's been 30 years. And so like the idea that they would be like, well, Shedeur looks really great, but like I'm not a fan of his dad. And I mean, like I don't even really understand what the reasoning would necessarily be for that. And so, yeah, you're right about all the like social media stuff, right? It's the same thing as like politics. People like need to zag and then therefore sort of create some kind of a base based off of that zag, right? Because there are enough people there who are so downtrodden and frankly dumb that like they're willing to just kind of follow anything that is like against the universe that's treated them or how they feel the world has treated them negatively. And so in this case there is this like collection of human beings who want or think that there is some sort of conspiracy against Shedeur Sanders.
And you try to make it into like it being all these other things that it has nothing to do with, like making it a race issue or about his dad being loud or about whatever. But also what this becomes is it's just people consume a sport through social media. So they're not actually watching games. Yeah. So they've seen the highlights of Shedeur Sanders, even going back to college, but not actually watching the games in which continuously, time and time again, he runs backwards and gets sacked. That's happened in college a bunch of times, and it continues to happen in the preseason, and it happened last week again. And the one thing that you cannot do or you should not do as a quarterback, there are many things you shouldn't do, but one you definitely shouldn't do is continuously run backwards and then get sacked.
Yeah.
Can't do that in the NFL.
Yes, he is an even worse athlete and, a dime store version of Caleb Williams doing the things that Caleb Williams is trying to get sort of beaten out of him by Ben Johnson and a good offensive coordinator. And so if he's refusing to do those things, thinking that he's a better athlete than he ever even could have dreamed of being, even back in college, then like it's just never going to work out, which brings us to this week.
Yes.
I think the Browns can beat the Raiders without a quarterback. I think Troy Aikman and Joe Buck were kind to the position that the Raiders put the interior of their offensive line in this past week, right? Their two best offensive linemen are out for the season, and so it's just a tough scenario. And so, the Raiders bench, Alex Kappa, and they put in these two guys in the middle, and it's just like blow up, blow up, blow up. How is that going to work against the Browns defense?
Yeah.
Right? Like if you're like, well, the Cowboys defense and their front, like, it's only okay. Like the Browns defense is just going to absolutely feast over and over and over again, which then turns in to Geno Smith throwing the ball constantly, and that dude's lost out there too. Like, we can get all upset about Shedeur Sanders in one way or another. Like, nobody's stolen more money over the course of his career than Geno Smith, right? And so, like, that guy, kudos to him, but, like, honest to God, like, he's had two good games, like, in his life that happened, like, right at the right time so that he had cool quotes on Monday Night Football about, not calling back or whatever. And so, I feel like it's going to be turnovers. I feel like, listen, we had even a safety in the mix this past Monday night.
Yeah.
And then I think if Shedeur, who comes into that situation, listen, the situation sucked for Shedeur, like coming in that position. So I don't think we should be judging him off of that. We should just be judging him off of like what his own team, desperate for a quarterback, like, the way that they are sort of treating the whole thing. And no, like Dylan Gabriel does not look like he is it, but Dylan Gabriel, or whatever Dylan Gabriel gave them, or whatever they were able to do around Dylan Gabriel, was enough to have a real opportunity to beat the Ravens last week and beat the Dolphins pretty handily a couple of weeks before that, and get a couple of wins here or there this season. And so it's not that Shedeur Sanders is the future or anything close to that. It's that, like, how much worse could he possibly be than Dylan Gabriel? And I think that's sort of the argument for Sanders from the Sandersites, the acolytes of the Sanders family. And so, which is all like fair to a degree, where it's like, all right, let's see it. And the funny part is, like, all he has to do is take the snap, turn around and hand the ball to Quinshon Judkins. And you probably just do that like 30 times. And then whatever happens with those plays, if the rest of the game is them punting it back to the Raiders and letting the Browns defense just do stuff, you're probably keeping this thing within a field goal. Right? Yeah. Like, and maybe like the Browns win actually pretty handily because Geno turns the ball over 3 times instead of 1 time. Because, by the way, like, the Raiders only turned the ball over 1 time last week, right? Like pretty sure it's just a 1 interception from Geno when they were down, like, again, in the sort of red zone area. So what does 2 or 3 turnovers look like? Because Geno's leading the league in interceptions with, like, fewer games than Tua Tagovailoa, I think he's tied with. So, like, I don't know. That seems like a bad recipe. And, like, we talked about it when the Raiders were favored against the Titans. And the Raiders covered that game, right? They won that game. Was that the last game that they won? I think it might have been the last game that they won. And they won that game. And then I came and I talked to you the next week. I was like, how many yards did they outgain the Titans by? And you're like, I don't know, 50. And it's like 1. They had 1 more yard than the Titans. Yeah. So, like, I think the Browns are better than the Titans. And again, I don't think they need Shedeur Sanders to throw. And if you can get 10 plays out of Shedeur, where it's just 10 simple throws in the playbook in a week,
you're good.
I think you're just kind of good against this Raiders team, because your defense, like, what's the next move for Pete Carroll, right? You can't get that team as a whole up and ready and able to compete in a meaningful way on a Monday Night Football game at home. You're going to be able to get them to do that the week after when you have no idea who should be playing on your offensive line because of injuries. Again, not necessarily their fault. Yeah, I don't know how you can lay points with the Raiders. And again, if it's because of Shedeur going 4 for 14 for 40 yards and Justina Anderson tweeting stuff, that's why we're getting a hook here. Because the look ahead line was 3, and that's when we thought the Raiders had hope of beating the Cowboys. And it's like, honestly, like, I want to downgrade the Raiders more from watching them play on Monday night than I want to downgrade the Browns because Shedeur Sanders is going to play quarterback.
So this pick has been changed in truth serum here for me. I went back and forth on this spread at least 3 or 4 times this morning while prepping for this. So this is an easy switch for me. I also feel that the internet world, we need this win by the Browns just for the internet to explode and have people be like, see, Shedeur should have been playing the entire time. It's like, we never
give it to me.
People forget about how the NFL works. And it's like, you can have 1 week where you win a game. As you mentioned, it's not even about the quarterback, but you could also have like Tebow time was a thing. Like, that was a thing that happened. And that never meant that he was ever good. Right. It just was a thing.
Won a bunch of football games.
Yeah, it was just a thing that happened. But hey, I'm here for all the internet insane behavior that will go on if Shedeur makes 3 good plays in this game and they win. But yes, I'll keep it going here because, we got a couple more games to plow through here. And I know I spent so much time talking about Shedeur, so that is my fault. But we'll keep going here. We got the Seahawks at the Titans. Seahawks laying 13.5 points on the road. I will lay said 13.5 points on the road with the Seahawks. The Titans had a chance to win. They covered. And, hey, we were good here. But they should have won that game. They just couldn't pull it off late. I understand. The Seahawks, meanwhile, last week, I'm not going to be scared off by Sam Darnold and how he looked. He might have looked more like the Jets version of Sam Darnold, because we talked about how good we think the Rams defense is. So when the Rams defense does good Rams defense things, I'm not going to blame Sam Darnold. Just had a bad game, and that's allowed. So, and again, they almost won that game still, despite all the turnovers by Sam Darnold. They only lost by 2. They had a 61-yard field goal attempt to win the game. So, hey, back to business against the Titans. Yeah, Titans aren't the Rams. I will lay the 13.5 points on the road.
Okay. I can't get to 13.5.
No, that's fine.
It.
Listen, that's fine. Under 2 touchdowns, I'm in. That's just where I'm at.
Yeah, I get it. I don't think I can get there with this number because it requires another scenario where the losing team from last week. Now, again, they cover, right? I think if you didn't bet it, you could forget that the Seahawks actually came back and covered. And I think your point about still kind of liking the Seahawks, I think is not only valid, but I think we're all kind of in that boat, right? Where we think that the Rams and the Seahawks are both really, really good football teams, and nothing from last week necessarily changed that. I just talked like the Bears and the Vikings deal from last week, where it's like we're just not supposed to bet on a team that is getting an upgrade despite the fact that like they lost the game. And so it's sort of just a fundamental bet for me, or non-bet, if you will. Haven't necessarily decided if I'm actually betting the Titans. And again, by the way, watched an alarming amount of Titans football last week. And again, the defense is good enough that there's a possibility that like they kind of malinger in this game and they maybe lose by 7 or 10, the way that they lost by 7 or 10 against the Chargers, or it seemed like they might lose by 7 or 10, eventually losing by 3 against the Texans, and so on and so forth. So again, the other problem is, and we'll talk about this also from the other side of things from last week's kind of, really fun football game, is, a lot went into that football game between the Seahawks and the Rams, right? And I think if you ask the Seahawks, like, hey, if you beat the Rams here, would you be okay with losing to the Titans? Like, which game is more important to go into that win column because of all of the tiebreakers that would ensue in an NFC West that is absolutely bananas between those 3 teams? They might be like, yeah, it would suck to lose to the Titans, but man, we really want to win against the Rams. And so, I'd be really impressed if they were able to go across country and put in such a good performance that, again, it matches the rating that has been upgraded after a loss. And they cover by 2 full touchdowns. That's crazy. But again, and we talked about it last week about how the Rams and the Seahawks were teams that got an upgrade going into their game against each other, and how that was looking kind of wild next week. Well, we are now at next week, and it still looks wild to see that the Seahawks on the road are 13.5-point favorites against another professional football team, one that hasn't been playing as badly as they had earlier on in the season. The Titans got 2 straight point spread covers? Guys, we're doing it. We're doing it, Tennessee. We are doing it. And it's like, that just goes to show, right? You get to a point with the team's rating being quite literally the worst in the NFL, that it's like, yeah, if you just don't play the worst, if you don't just play the worst team, you can cover some of these numbers that the market supplies, right? Where it was at 1.7 against the Texans. I mean, not even close, 5.5 with Davis Mills on the road. I didn't really make a case about Davis Mills necessarily, but I made a case for the Texans with Davis Mills at the quarterback. But even I'm looking at that 5-point spread going I don't want anything to do with that. So the point is I have to feel the same way, but with respect for Seattle and just being 13.5, come on. Now are we going to see 14? Is there a cheap 14 out there? I would feel a lot better about a plus 14 at a minus 115 or something like that. So unlike some of these other games, I have not bet this yet.
Yeah, that's one you'll want to pay attention to for sure. So is this one, which is the Ravens, who are, speaking of the aforementioned 13.5 points, 13.5-point favorites at home to the Jets. And I'm laying the 13.5 points again here, more so just because no, I'm not going to say that. But I'm laying the 13.5 points here with the Ravens, who barely beat the Browns last week. Lamar struggled, sacked 4 times by Myles Garrett, which, I mean, Myles Garrett will do that to you sometimes. But I want to give a shout out to Mark Andrews for that fake tush push. What a great play. What a great play. That was awesome. Derrick Henry, good again as well. But going from in Cleveland to versus the Jets, and with that defense, I think the Ravens roll here. I just think the Jets are not very good at all. This is a massive ask for the Ravens. And the Ravens are either going to like show up and blow them out or just lose. Because that's what the Ravens do in these situations where this is what they do in these situations where you place expectations on them in big spreads at 1:00 games against nobody.
Yeah. Yeah. It feels like one of those games. I don't predict the exact sort of how this game plays out, but like it feels like one of those games where the Ravens it's sort of a slow start and it's like, yeah, it's kind of 10-70, 13-70, and then like you stop watching the game because you're like, there's other stuff to kind of like watch, or you drift away. You don't intentionally even do it, you just kind of forget to go back to it to check in on it, and then you look up and the game's over and it's like 41-13.
Yeah.
You're like, what happened? And it's like, well, the Ravens scored 3 touchdowns in the fourth quarter. And you're like, why? And you're like, I don't know. Like, DeAndre Hopkins had a touchdown and Keaton Mitchell had a touchdown. You're like, what? And it's like, well, the Jets felt compelled to start throwing, and then Tyrod Taylor got a little loose with the football. And the problem with that sort of script, if you will, is like Tyrod Taylor, the one thing that Tyrod Taylor does really well, it's not turn the football over.
Yeah.
He's like a super conservative, like I do what I can do type of dude here.
Yeah.
And so I think that keeps the score down potentially, and it keeps sort of turnovers and just general havoc to like a minimum.
Yeah.
So like, yeah, I get, and I'm not going to talk you out of the Ravens here because again, I just laid out kind of like how these Ravens games tend to go. The Ravens have, took a bit of a downgrade from that game last week. So I can't say that they're overrated because honestly, like we talked about the Bills, right? Like even just talking like the Bills at 70 out of 100, the Ravens ratings now like 65 out of 100.
Yeah.
And so that might not seem like much, but like if we think that both teams are kind of like 67, right? Like if they're both kind of like in between, like meet them in the middle, then there's a little bit of value on the Ravens, and then there's a little bit of value in fading the Bills before we even kind of talk about their opponents. And so from a Jets perspective, yeah, their rating has gone actually up. One, they hung around just long enough for the Patriots to push that final closing number, but also like people hate Justin Fields as a quarterback. And so, again, like bringing Tyrod Taylor in there means that like, yeah, maybe that's not going to be as bad from an offensive like functionality standpoint. And if that means sort of covering a big number in 13, then that's what that means. But it's not some huge upgrade because of Taylor being in for Fields. It's just enough for them to be, ahead of the Fernando Mendoza line, right? That number of 20 out of 100, where if like you are the worst team in the league, then you go below 20 out of 100. And so the Jets, Titans get a little credit. So they're above the Mendoza line because of, covering those 2 straight games. And Tyrod Taylor's just general presence has moved the Jets to be just above that Mendoza line. But if you think that the Jets aren't any better with Taylor than they were with Fields, then again, maybe there's some value here on the Ravens as well. Tough call.
Yeah, I'm on the Ravens there. We'll see how that one goes. We're on to Sunday Night Football. We got the Bucs heading to LA to take on the Rams. Rams favored by 6.5 points. I can't lie to you. I wanted to take the points here in the Bucs. I wanted to take the Bucs. I've been rolling with the Bucs, trying to talk myself into, what Baker's doing and finally believing in the ride. But last week you got me to switch over to the Bills, which, the Bills brought that home and it worked for us, But I look up and the Bucs defense, I'm always so focused on Baker, but the Bucs defense has gave up 850 yards and 72 points in their last 2 games. That's a lot.
Great.
That's not good. That's not good. Their special teams also were so bad against the Buffalo Bills that they continuously were getting such great field position. Now, if I equate that and transfer that over to the Rams, who have a really good offense and again have a really good defense, I'm just here and I'm going to lay the 6.5 points with the touchdown. And I know I might regret this because it's a big ask, but it's just my firm belief in what the Rams are doing right now versus my lack of belief in what the Bucs are doing right now.
Yeah, it's funny. You hit me with that last sentence, and it just kind of like barreled over me where I was like, oh, right. I am supposed to still be betting the Rams at any given number. Like, again, and it's so funny because I'm like last week, I said basically the only reason I'm betting on the Rams here, -3. Now, that game ended up popping up to 3.5. So, again, we were sort of theoretically on the right side there. And by the way, like, you pick off Sam Darnold 4 times, and, the Seahawks are only able to get field goals on basically their first 3, like, scoring drives. Like, you should cover that game.
Yeah.
So, you lose the bet, but I'm like, were we on the wrong side? I don't necessarily think that we necessarily were. I'll put it this way, right? Going back to the Bills thing, this thing can work in 2 ways, right? Do not bet against the Bucs this week because you felt like they are sort of lessened because of what happened last week because of the Bills. Because as much as Matthew Stafford's the favorite for the MVP, I would have kind of no problem at this point with him getting it. We'll see sort of what happens in the last few weeks. He's not Josh Allen, right? Like, he's not doing the things that Josh Allen does as far as like the heroism that is involved there. Now, does that mean that the Rams can't score? Yeah. That's right. I was going to say, does that mean the Rams can't do it a different way and like just score like a bleep ton of points? But again, we use the Bills thing. I'm also going to use the Seahawks handicap against the Titans. Big game last week, man. Like, putting a lot into that game, and now you have the Bucs in a kind of a perfect Baker Mayfield spot.
Oh, yeah.
Right, where it's like you just lost 2 games, man, and the Sheldons of the world over here are bailing on you, and you're getting 6.5 points, and you're playing indoors, and like it's gonna, his vibes never quit. Like, he's still gonna be doing the stuff. Now, again, that's not enough to win a football game, but what if the Bucs get a little bit healthier here? Like, we'll see about Bucky Irving. We're still waiting on that. Now, listen. Running backs for Tampa Bay did a hell of a job last week. They wasn't necessarily the lack of Bucky Irving that changed anything, but we've also got maybe a Chris Godwin Jr. who's questionable, maybe Ben Bredeson on the offensive line. I know your boy, Ben Bredeson, but again, you get a little healthier on the offensive line. Maybe Hassan Reddick comes back. There's some questionability about, obviously, Jamel Dean. That would be really, really huge. But again, you're getting 6.5 points here on a Buccaneers team that, like, everybody I heard was betting the Buccaneers on +5.5 last week in Buffalo. Everybody that I heard was betting the Buccaneers -2.5 the week before against the Patriots. And so, like, yeah, neither of those things worked out for those people. And so now it's a mass exodus on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. But there's a different ask. Well, maybe not that much of a different ask from last week. It's basically the same point spread. But again, like, this is that scenario where, like, the Rams, who, again, not spoiler alert, the tease that I gave earlier about the Chiefs being tied atop the NFL ratings. Shell, who do you think they're tied with all of a sudden?
Oh, it's the Rams rolling.
The Rams, right? And again, I wish when I went back, we go back to the preview, and I said, I think we need to be betting on the Rams every time Matthew Stafford plays because I don't think that they're rated accurately. I wish I had said one thing. Wish I had said they are eventually going to be the top-rated team in the NFL. That would be incredibly prescient. And I wish I had done one thing, and that would have been bet on the Rams every single freaking week until they hit the rating of the Chiefs, until they are rated as the top team in the league. So again, all of the betting that should have or was done on the Rams up until this point was done so before they were given the full respect of being one of the best teams, one of the best 2 teams, that if they played the Super Bowl tomorrow against the Kansas City Chiefs, in theory, that game would be a pick 'em. Now, of course, that would require the Chiefs to have won a bunch of playoff games, and then the Chiefs rating is going to go up through the roof, and they're going to end up being favored in a Super Bowl, which then means we would then be betting on the Rams against Patrick Mahomes in a Super Bowl, and it would be all kinds of chaos for our lives, which is exactly what happened last year with the Eagles. Anyway, point is like, you got to understand, like, the Rams are being rated as best as they have been maybe ever. And again, right there with the Chiefs. And so again, like, maybe there's room upwards. Maybe they're a 75. Maybe they're a 77. It's just, again, can they play that way this week? Can you give me that level? Right? Can you give me that level this week? I don't know that they can.
I'll say
It's
you
asking a
all.
lot. It's asking. I'd be impressed.
It's a huge ask. I will say you almost had me, but I'm rolling with the Rams until the wheels fall off here. We go
Okay.
into Monday Night Football, the last game of the week as we wrap things up on the pod. We got the San Francisco 49ers as 7-point favorites at home against the Panthers, and Bryce Young, almost 450 yards passing, 3 touchdowns, 0 picks, and another fourth quarter comeback last week as they won in OT against the Falcons. But it's the Falcons. Essentially, I guess we're learning that the Panthers can't be favorites, right? That's basically what it is. But on the Niners, flip side, Brock Purdy was back, as you mentioned. Their offense looked great. Bottom line is, let CMC cook. Niners look solid. Put in Brock Purdy. Put in Jimmy Garoppolo. Put in Mac Jones. I'm still riding with Mac Jones. But hey, Brock Purdy looked good. I'm all right. I'm laying the 7 points with the Niners here. As the only issue is, of course, the Niners defense isn't good enough to be laying 7 points, but I'm going to do it anyways.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's the thing that's going to need to be parsed out. I'm going to play my, Monday Night Football card, right? Where it's I don't need to know about Monday Night Football until I need to know about Monday Night Football. On the surface, well, I'll put it this way, like +7 with Carolina against a defense as like bad as they are. Again, it's 1 week, but at least Bryce Young showed something from a throwing, the ball perspective. And honestly, I think he threw Teteroa McMillan into, I believe, to be the favorite for offensive rookie of the year. Like, obviously, we got started this season with the Emeka Ibuka train and like who from the quarterback group was going to kind of be in that mix. Turns out kind of nobody unless Jackson Dart kind of comes back here. And now you've got McMillan against Ibuka and Tyler Warren as kind of this 3-headed receiving option monster here. And McMillan has the best numbers. And now they get to go against a 49ers defense that, still haven't really stopped anybody. And so we might have ourselves kind of a shootout type of deal here where maybe the over is in play. I find it really tough to lay the points here with San Francisco. But again, they got a huge upgrade when Brock Purdy came back last week, right? And we were like, how is it 3? I think he can touch some 3.5 on the road at Arizona. Again, based on Arizona's rating and the fact that they're 3-point underdogs to the Jags, I think that had more to do with the Cardinals getting a downgraded. Again, part of that because of injuries and stuff. Yeah, like I would be, again, it's crazy to say because it's the Panthers. I'd be really impressed if the 49ers won this game by 2 scores.
Yeah.
Because I think
definitely.
that Carolina can do enough offensively, whether it's like the General Rico Dowdle situation where he didn't really do much in that game, didn't really have to, as crazy as that sounds, because of Bryce Young being able to throw the ball around. So I think there could be a lot of people who are just kind of making some assumptions about the 49ers being quote unquote back, and that the Panthers record is largely smoke and mirrors. But like, if they were anybody other than the Panthers and they had pulled off some of the stuff that they've pulled off in the last few, honestly, all season, right? With obviously some dicey games in there as well, right? Like losing to the Saints at home wasn't particularly all that pretty, but like maybe the road is just a better place for the Panthers. Like sometimes these teams, man, like it's just a better place to just be away from home. And maybe, with their game against the Falcons and this game with the 49ers, it's just a scenario where if you put sort of a bad enough defense or just a beaten defense up against them, then yeah, they might be able to do some stuff here. And so this could be a little bit closer than I think from a branding perspective. Like we looked at this on the schedule, we're like, what is a Panthers 49ers Monday Night Football game doing on here? Like, who thinks that's a good idea? And honestly, it kind of turned out to be like the best it could possibly be. Like, this is the best I've felt about my interest, in a Panthers 49ers game, like ever, I think, right? Like, maybe since like the late 90s or whenever the last time the Panthers were actually good. Was Jake Delhomme involved? Maybe Cam Newton.
Sure.
There's got to be a Cam Newton 49ers matchup in there.
Killer Cam for sure. But before we get to that Monday night game, where can the people find your info on everything else in between now and then?
We're going to pump this up because honestly, I think it's kind of like for a singular thing, it's the most fun and hopefully valuable thing. And it's the Thanksgiving Football Spectacular at the window over on the Substack, right? It is one long article with full bets, preview, everything on all 4 games, 3 Thanksgiving games, and the Black Friday game, all in one stop shop, right? And so if you were going to hypothetically become a paid member over at the window, that would be the time at this point to do it. We're going to have a little Black Friday Thanksgiving sale, if you will, over there as well. So just go to Substack, type in the window, Matt Russell, sports betting, any combination of those words, and you're going to be on your way. And to sort of start your window experience with the Thanksgiving Football Spectacular, leading into bowl season and the Christmas Spectacular and the playoffs, both college and pro, and of course the Super Bowl. And then we get into college basketball and the NHL Stanley Cup playoffs. This is kind of the time, if it's always tricky to kind of jump in the middle of the double Dutch game that is the sports betting calendar. And if you're not going to do it in the summertime, this is the time to do it because, that Thursday and Friday with all those games, throw in the college stuff. We're having an amazing college football year. That's the time to do it, honestly.
Yeah, it's going to be a wild, wild week. It's one of my favorite weeks of the sporting calendar for sure. We get into Thursday, American Thanksgiving. It's a great time. It's a great holiday. So, of course, you can find me online at Shell Alexander on Twitter, at Sheldon Alexander on Instagram. And of course, make sure you like, follow, and subscribe to the podcast at Apple, Spotify, and of course, YouTube, because I used to pray for times like this to rhyme like this. This is the Clutch Picks Betting Podcast, as always, unpolished and unapologetic. Until next time, see ya.